Miichelle Graves, your host on today's segment of The Power of Money. I'm glad to have you here. Now, at The Power of Money, we are interested in three things happening. First, we want you to get the necessary education so that you and your family can make the decisions that will impact positively on you in your financial life. The second thing is that you be empowered to prosper. I only want the best for you. And you can only get that if you have education and then the drive to make it happen. And the third thing that is so important to me is that you recognize that life is more than a journey and that you be energized so that you can begin to participate in the truly joyous experience of living. So, here's to empowerment, here's to education, and here's to energy. I'm Miichelle Graves, your host, Power of Money. And here we go. And here we go. I'm delighted to be in your world for the next hour, and I have a remarkable individual who is my guest on today's segment of The Power of Money, Elder Dennis Hatchett. He is a previous guest. In fact, he's a friend and has tremendous wisdom and insight. So I wanted to reconnect. He is a newlywed individual, and I have a standing rule that I let married people that are fresh be to themselves. So I gave him a year break, but that's over. And so I told him, you need to come on the show because I need to play catch up and find out where you are and where we're heading as a nation. His insights are profound. They've always been for me. So without further ado, allow me to introduce my guest today, who is Elder Dennis Hatchett out of Cincinnati, Ohio. And we're going to just let this show flow. Well,
good morning.
How are you? Good morning.
I am wonderful, Michelle.
You're
it is great
always
to see you
wonderful.
Again.
Same here. Where do we want to begin? Why don't you tell people that don't know who you are?
Well, I'm just one of those little people that want to do great things for a great individual called our Father.
Yes.
And the thing is, I've humbled myself, Michelle, and I don't get caught up in the titles anymore. I don't get caught up in the labels anymore because they only identify the level of responsibility that we have.
That's all they do.
And if I take the energy out of the label and if I take the energy out of the title, then it's easier for other people to connect with me as opposed to trying to look up at me and trying to no, and now I can see you eye to eye.
Yes.
We can talk face to face, and
Yes.
we can be toe to toe, and no one's uncomfortable because it's just one person talking to another person. So I'm just another person, another one of God's children that He has given an assignment to, and I'm doing everything that I can do to fulfill that assignment.
That's awesome, and I appreciate the fact that you are not title driven because we're living in a time where people are not looking for a title. They're looking for the ability to connect and to know that you care. And when people that love titles, oh, I'm reverend, or I'm elder, or I'm an apostle, or when they begin to understand that nobody cares about that.
Absolutely.
They are concerned about whether you care about them and their families. And if that's absent, it doesn't matter what title you stick onto your name.
Well, I'm in the place to ask this question about titles. Does your title mean anything if you can't impact people to grow, change, and evolve into something positive and something better than they know? Because if all you have is a title and nothing around you ever changes, then what do you have?
An illusion.
Exactly. And the thing is,
an illusion.
And I've separated myself from the illusionary world because it is real. It is very real.
Yes.
But the reality is, if we come and start reevaluating ourselves to understand that we are those trees planted by the river and understand what tree we are then we come to understand what
Well,
responsibilities
let's talk
we have.
about this tree thing, because I just read an article that said that trees talk to each other, communicate with each other,
Absolutely.
communicate with their little sproutlings,
Mm-hmm.
and all of the above. And I found it to be very, very interesting, because I know that trees and everything around us that has life communicates.
Absolutely. You
Would
know,
you-
I tell people this. Everything that you do sends a message. Everything that you say sends a message. Everything you don't do sends a message. And everything that you don't say sends a message. And we have to become masters of the messages that we send. Because if we accept the responsibility of knowing that everything that we do, everything that we say, everything that we don't do, and everything that we don't say sends a message, and we become mindful to understand the messages that we're sending, now we can easily gauge why people perceive us in the manners and the ways that they do. And at the same time, you'll also start understanding why they misunderstand you in the ways that they do.
But don't you think a lot of that has to do with their own internal filtering, Dennis?
Well, all of it has to do with the internal filtering. That's why one of the things that we've established out of Embrace Kingdom Life was a business we call Real Talk.
Okay.
And Real Talk is an acronym, which is RELE,
Okay.
Talk, Reevaluating Life's Evolution through Aligned Leverage Knowledge.
Whoa,
And
whoa, 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 whoa. I'm not Einstein. I'm
Okay.
smart, but I'm not that smart. Translate.
Well, reevaluating life's evolution, RELE. It's not that we're reevaluating the evolution of life. We're reevaluating our own evolution and how we've lived and how we've come to live. Because if you don't reevaluate all the influences and the elements that have come together to make you who you are, then you really don't know who you are. And many of us are running around here and we're apple trees and we're trying to look like an orange tree. Many of us are cherry trees and we're trying to be a banana. And the reality is we don't know that we're dysfunctional because we believe in what we believe we're doing. And we think what we're doing is authentically real, and we don't really understand that it's not, because we're operating in a dimension that we haven't been developed in. We're trying to do things we haven't been prepared for. And the reality is everything that you have done and everything that's been done to you has been part of what's prepared you to be exactly who you are right now. So if you don't...
Your true, authentic self.
Exactly. But we gravitate to all the images that society creates and the fame that society creates, and we all try to emulate those kinds of formulative beings in ourselves, and it's not a part of who we are. It's not our DNA. It's not who we are. And we spend so much time, so much effort, and so much money trying to be something God never created us to be.
You know, that's so very, very insightful, because I think about my own journey, and with aging, something as simple as getting older. And we live in a society where the focus with women is anti-aging. Never embrace aging as a part of life's evolution. So women literally spend billions of dollars, billions, trying to get skinnier, trying to eliminate wrinkles, trying to be a better self, when it's ludicrous.
Well, you know what? In the world that they live in, it's real. But when we come to understand the evolution of God, when we understand how God designed things to be,
Okay.
He said that we're supposed to be eternal beings because He is an
Eternal God,
And He
yes.
created us in His likeness and in His image. So if we're supposed to be eternal beings, as Jesus said in John 11:26, those that believe in me, those that are in me, shall never die. But the
He said
reality is, if we don't do a study to understand what responsibility we have to accept, what things we're supposed to be doing that posture us in the appropriate position to be able to make that a manifested reality, it never happens. And the reality is, the world has gotten so far from what God said and so wrapped up into what the world says. It's almost impossible for them to come out of that world's evolution because they don't know anything else.
And you said a key thing. They don't know anything else.
Exactly.
So my premise has always been, if I know better,
I'll do better.
I'll do better. Correct?
Exactly.
That's rational.
Exactly.
But if you are in a world system where knowledge is held in contempt, I mean, something as basic as what we're dealing with now about masking and social distancing, and this COVID has been revelatory to me with the number of people that want to debate science.
Exactly.
With no background, training, credentialing, etc. As I told one person, did you get an F in biology? You had to have gotten an F in biology, okay? Or did you even take it? Okay, maybe you didn't take it, but it's that lack of, I guess, maturity to understand how this looks, and that things are not all over the place, but they do proceed in a very rational pattern because God is a rational God.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, one of the things that I try to illustrate to people so that they get an understanding of where we are as a people. I tell them, I say, let's go back to the story where Jesus told the disciples to get on the boat and let's go over to the other side.
Yes, yes.
And when they started going over to the other side, there ensued this storm.
Right.
And Jesus was in the belly of the boat. Sleep.
Right.
So now the thing is, all of these things are going on, and the winds and the waves and all these things are going on, and everybody's getting all up in an uproar because and they go down and wake Jesus up and say, Jesus, don't you care that we're going to die? And
Right.
Jesus awakes out of his sleep and says, you of little faith.
Right.
And he walks up and he says, peace be still. And the reality is we don't recognize that we have the authority to stand up and say, peace be still. And we also don't recognize that even in the midst of the storm, we're still supposed to be asleep.
You know, that is profound, but that is the truth.
And the thing is to connect with, how do I get to this place that I can be peaceful
At peace.
in the midst of the storm?
Right.
And the Bible gives you simple instructions, but we don't follow them. The Bible says, come out.
Well, social isolation is real. People do like to connect.
And the reality is there's nothing wrong with connecting, but the thing is, if you connect negative and positive, what do you get?
Right,
They
they
repel each other.
They repel
so
each
the
other.
reality is we have to come to a place to gravitate to those things that are positive, learn and glean from those positives while staying our distance from the negatives, because the negatives are always going to be there, because Jesus said the poor or the negative
Yes.
you have with you always.
Right.
And one of the other illustrations that I give to people is this. If you have an alcoholic that has
Okay.
2 twin boys, and now one of these boys grows up and becomes an alcoholic, just
Okay.
like dad.
Right.
But then the other one grows up and never touches the stuff. So then you ask him, why did you grow up to be an alcoholic? And he said, because I was raised on one. And then you ask the other one, well, why did you not grow up to be an alcoholic? He said, because I was raised by one.
Yeah.
The point of the matter is this. The information that both of them had to process was exactly the same. But their reality is one chose a different way of processing the information and subsequently came up with a different ending. And the reality is it's not the information that we're bombarded with, it's how we choose to deal with it that makes the significant difference.
So as we look at the time in history we're in right now, what are some of the key, from your perspective, key indicators that things are not getting better?
Oh, things are not getting better at all in any realm of speaking, because the world is in a massive dysfunction. And all the systems that the world has created, they're starting to falter and fail.
Can you be specific?
let's talk about the stock market.
Okay.
And it continues to crash, and it
Right.
does this, and it crashes, and
Right.
it does this, and it crashes. Well, and they keep reorganizing
Yeah,
it,
they
and
do. Yeah, they do.
breathing life back into
Trying.
it, and it crashes again.
Yeah.
All of these crashes that we're experiencing, the housing market crashed, all of these systems that are crashing are just indicators to the system's fail-safes not operating and functioning anymore. So now, since their fail-safes are not doing what they're supposed to do,
Right.
and the failures are accumulating, now we have to look and say, okay, do we trust in these things in the manner that we trusted in them 50 years ago?
Well, I don't think people know what to do. That's where I really feel, because even the basic foundations, for example, most churches haven't met in a year.
But you know the
That's
reality?
major.
It is major, but the reality is this is the need for the re-evaluation of
Okay.
evolution, because if we come to recognize how we got here, then we'll start to formulate a vision
Okay, for our
of
future.
where we need to go, because the thing is we need to trade our sight in for vision, because we spend
Trade
so
our
much.
sight in for vision.
Exactly.
That's good.
We always look at these things and we evaluate these things and say, oh, this is what it is, and this is what it is, and this is what it is. What do we do? As opposed to recognizing, the Bible says not to look at those things that are seen, but look toward the things that are not seen, because the things that are seen are temporal. The
Right.
things that are not seen are eternal.
eternal,
So if we
yes.
start looking to the vision of the eternal things, and we start looking beyond what we see to recognize what we see is not working. So once we see that what we're doing is not working, is it not time to do something different? And this is the reality. It doesn't matter what you choose to do differently, as long as you choose to do something different, because this is the thing. We have to adapt a mindset that I refer to as the Abrahamic mindset.
Okay.
And why is it the Abrahamic mindset? Good question. Glad you asked.
Yeah.
It's the Abrahamic mindset because God told Abraham, come and go into the land I will show you.
Okay, he did.
So this is the reality. Where we are, our Father wants to show us somewhere greater. He wants to take us somewhere different. But the reality is we have to be willing to go. So if we just simply start doing something different, we're going in another direction. And as we go in the other direction, we're going to make many mistakes. But the thing that we have to realize, our mistakes are not a bad thing. Our mistakes are the building blocks to our new home.
I got it.
And the reality is, the
I'm
more mistakes you
excited.
make, the more solid your home's going to be.
Yes.
Because
yes.
the greater the foundation is going to be.
Right.
And the world has trained us to come into situations and be perfect, and you can't make mistakes, and you get penalized for mistakes.
Yes.
You get punished for mistakes. But no, we come back and we're going to make the mistakes because we're going to learn from the mistakes that we made, and the lessons that we accomplish and acquire from the mistakes that we made will be the building blocks to formulate the vision of where God is leading us to.
Okay.
Because the realities are real simple, but the process, okay, I'm going to let that germinate for a minute. The process is what we have to understand, and we have to understand this is not a light switch thing where we're going to stop doing this today and we're going to start doing this tomorrow. No, we're going to stop doing this today and we're going to learn how to do this tomorrow. And all of the things that we're doing are going to be brand new. We're not going to have any training for it. We're not going to be prepared for it. So it's going to be OJT, on the job training. You're going to learn as you go. But the reality is we have to go. Because if you stay where you are.
Oh my gosh, Dennis, people don't want to go and people don't want to change. I don't believe that, particularly as you grow older. It's not the same mandate as with young people. As you grow older, you just want to be able to just do nothing.
Well, that's a good thing, but nothing from nothing means
nothing. Right. So how do you impart into my generation the necessity of evolution and change when people find it very hard? They have a very different time hard time to even adjust to minor changes, like you got to have internet. You got to have a real phone.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You have to be willing to recognize that technology and information have changed the playing field. These are real things that people are dealing with right now.
Mm-hmm. That's
that
true.
you are not going to be out here in an abyss, that you have to grab these technologies, you have to understand what they look like, and then you have to be willing to be adaptable and flexible, or else you'll be a Tyrannosaurus Rex. You'll be history.
In their eyes.
In their eyes.
And that's where we go back to the Abrahamic mindset.
Okay.
Because one of the questions that I asked people about Abraham, I said, do we understand that there's a reason why Abraham was 99 years old before he came into the promise of God?
Jeez. No.
So now, if he was 99 before he came into the promise, because when he started his journey, he had to go through the separation of his family,
yes,
and the dying
yes,
of his parents, the moving of Lot into another dimension while
right,
he goes to another. All of these things were part of the evolution that brought him to that place of where he was, where God called him to be in the first place. He said, come out from them and be ye separate.
Right.
So when Abraham finally became separate is when God started molding and formulating the promise. And Abraham was 99 years old. So if Abraham was 99 years old before he came into the promise of God, and here I sit 62, and I haven't fulfilled the promise of God, why am I stressed in trying to, I need to get this done, and I need to hurry up? Why? I still got 30 some odd years to work on it.
You're right.
So if I still got 30 some odd years to work on it, they'd be like, well, no, you don't understand. Your clock is ticking, and you're aging, and you're. And I said, but do you understand? I'm 62 years old, and I don't have any sickness. I don't have any disease. I don't have any infirmities. I don't have any physical challenges that prohibit me from doing anything that I want to do. And I said, and this is the restoration, Abashika. This is the restoration process of God. But the restoration process of God was exemplified through Abraham.
Okay.
Which is why they call Abraham the father of many nations. Because now if Abraham was restored at the age of 99 to be able to start a family at the age of 99, and I'm like, and in common world's development, in common world's understanding, all of these things are impossible. How are you 99 and getting ready to start a family at 99? Really?
Yeah, that's extreme. But
because
you know
you're
what
going to
I find interesting, what you said, that I just caught it, is the fact that he had to, it took him a minute to put everything in order. Mm-hmm. It was not overnight, him
Absolutely.
moving his nephew to another country. That just occurred to me, the nephew and all his cattle, all his resources, everything had to be moved.
Absolutely.
His father had to be buried, his mother, all these things had to be handled before he came unto his own. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
That is.
And in each one of those things you just mentioned, each one of them were seasons.
Talk about that.
They were patterns that had to play out so that these things could happen.
Okay.
They had to come at odds with each other so that there could be this separation. He had to have a vision of wanting something far greater, while Abraham was content in where God had him. Because Abraham knew that wherever he had him, he would multiply him. So he wasn't concerned about having all the things that Lot was concerned about having.
Yes.
So
and
all
to
of
think
those,
he had to go and rescue Lot.
Absolutely.
I mean, that is so, that's profound.
And that's another season of things that had to happen. Because all of these things are seasons of things that happen so that you come to a place of understanding something greater than you had understood before you even got started. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, we have to understand in these processes that we go through, they're all learning seasons and processes to make us better at the other side. But the thing we look for is Genesis 6:3, I believe it is. It says, our days upon the land are 120.
Okay.
So why am I stressing at 62?
When he's already said 120.
If he said 120, and I say I'm sitting here at 62, I still got 58 years to go. Right. I'm only halfway there.
Right.
So now my thing
So what
is,
happens? How do people miss the mark? What happens?
well, we miss the mark in a lot of instances because the mark has been changed for us.
Oh, wow.
Because the world has created a mark. They've created an evolution. They've created a system that utilizes all that you are, takes advantage of all that you are,
Yes.
extracts all that you have, and then throws you away. And then usually you get thrown away at the age of 65. Yeah, that's usually the throwaway age.
That's usually the throwaway.
Because that's when they're preparing for you to,
Move on.
Exactly.
Move on.
But now the thing is, when you come to that place where you've evolved into what God said you're supposed to be, because you've reevaluated the process of evolution to where you have become, and you recognize you've become a formulative part of this system and disconnected from God's system, when you recognize, now I'm going to separate from this system that I've become evolved in, and now I'm going to learn how to evolve in God's system. And the evolution process is just as intricate as the process you've already came through. So if you came through a process that took 62 years to get you here, isn't it safe to say you're going to have to spend another 62 years over here to get it right?
Oh my gosh.
So the reality is, when do we stop trying to make things happen and rush things happen and know that things happen in God's time? Because when even Abraham,
that whole issue of God's time versus our own, and the fact that the culture and the system has deluded us into believing that we have to get it now. This acquisition, this mindset, this behavior that says, I got to get it now. If I don't get it now, I'm going to get old and die. And aging is true. Death is not guaranteed, not at 69, 65. It's all a part, again, of culture. But for me, the comfort of knowing that 120 years is what God says, not the 4 that is quoted all the time. People get very excited when they say, well, he let me live. I think it's 4.
But see, this is the thing. We leave out a pertinent part of information because, yes, he let me live 4. Now, you have to choose to put on immortality. You have to choose to do the things and sow the seed that's going to create life. Because this is the thing that I ask people. If the Bible says that seed time and harvest is forever,
right?
Whatsoever a man soweth, so that shall you reap.
Yes.
If all you sow are the seeds of life, what's your harvest going to be?
Ooh.
Life. If you sow the seeds of death, your harvest will soon be death. If we stop sowing the seeds of death, and we grow into that element where we recognize, understand, and now start to see how I can contribute to the things called life. And when I make the adjustments in the things that I eat, and I start eating live foods, and I started eating the vines and the berries and all the herbs that God said were for your meat. Right. When I start eating these things, there's a transformation that starts inside the body. And that transformation that starts inside the body is what I call a healing. Because now you're being healed from all the stuff that you did before you came to this knowledge. And the reality is, once you come into that element and you start practicing the newness and you start feeling the newness, it encourages you to press on and go forward. What can I do to improve what I've already discovered? And how can I improve what I've discovered? And if we keep our focus on the mark of the high calling, which is, how do I improve this that I have? Right. If we always stay focused on improving what we have, we're always going to be going in the right direction. We're going to make many mistakes, but the mistakes, again, are our building blocks for where we're going. And the reality is, we cannot be afraid to make that mistake. Because I tell people all the time, I'm in the position in life, I'm looking for the mistakes. Why? Because I know I'm going to learn a lesson that's going to put me in a better place.
Mistakes, Dennis, will teach you a lot. I can say that at 69, heading to 70, life is truly a journey full of many, many false hopes, expectations that don't come to pass, and blow-ups.
Mistakes will teach you a lesson.
But they do
you
teach you
cannot
lessons.
get in a book.
pain always will.
Yes, it will.
And I think my mentor, Dr. Sabas, said it so well, that why is it that humans have to experience pain and suffering to retain the thought so that they can go forward a little wiser?
Well, the answer to that question is, it's said about Jesus.
Yes.
That he learned obedience through the things he suffered.
Yes.
The pain is for the adjusting of your attitude, for the adjusting of your mindset,
yes,
for the changing of your mind. Because the reality is, if you suffer this pain long enough, you're going to want to do something to get away from the pain. And when you make up your mind to say, when you reevaluate, how did I get here in this painful place?
Right.
When you come to understand that I made a decision back here to do this. And when I made the decision to do this, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, and this happened. And it put me in this position where I had to deal with this pressure that's causing this pain.
But a wise person would see it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm saying to you that there are many, many people who stay in a place of pain and do not have the insight to see it as you did it to yourself.
Right.
Nobody did it to you. You
Right.
did it to yourself.
But that's the purpose for the reevaluation.
Okay.
We have to reevaluate.
But there has to come a level of maturity that goes with that, because there's no way a man or a woman at 60 can look over their past and see where they just did stuff to themselves, and either they make a decision that I'm not doing that anymore, or they simply acquiesce to that as this is my fate and they let it go.
But you know what? It brings upon a different part of the whole scheme of the picture of Abraham, because then when we look at Abraham, we also have to look at the fact that all the examples that came from Abraham all had one thing in common.
What was that?
And they all had a mentor.
They did.
Esther had Mordecai.
She did.
Ruth had Naomi.
Yes.
So the reality is, there has to be someone with us in this reevaluation process, because you're not going to always see your way clear through all that you've done and all that you've been through. And there's going to have to be another set of objective eyes that's there to say, well, you know what? Did you pay attention to this? Mm-hmm. Did you recognize that? Wait a minute, you're missing this. And when someone else is there to bring to light those missing elements, because the thing is, if you evaluate an equation,
yes,
with 3 variables, you're always going to get the same answers. But now when you add another variable and you have now 4 variables, mm-hmm. the answers that you get are far greater. So the more information you can add to your reevaluation process,
the more you can learn and grow.
Exactly.
Now let me interrupt, because I'm dealing with a situation right now where I have watched a person over a long period of time consistently blow themselves up with lack of ability to follow through, to commit, to, and it feels they're in the kingdom. I mean, know scripture very well, but the reality is that their lives have been one of a rat in a cage, mm-hmm. where they go around. And when you want to speak to the issue, there is no willingness to even attempt to understand why their life has turned out like this. Well, don't judge me. That's what the young people say today. Don't judge me.
Absolutely.
You're like, I'm not judging you. Nobody's blowing themselves up. It's you.
But see, this is the thing, and I say in a lot of instances that most of us in leadership positions have taken a misdirective in our responsibility, and we feel like it's our responsibility to teach you a different thing. It's our responsibility to teach you a different thing, and it's our responsibility to make you understand a different thing, when that's not the reality and the mandate that God gave us. God gave us a mandate. He said, let your light shine that men may see your good works and glorify the Father.
So we as leaders are charged to walk it out before them.
We are supposed to be the models for the message. Because
that's powerful.
Because when we become a manifested reality of what it looks like, and we just simply operate in who we are in their presence, they're going to learn and be drawn to the presence.
Right.
And then the Bible says, let them that will come. So when them that will come, that's when you start the process. That's when you start the process of teaching.
Okay.
Because this is the thing. You can't teach someone something that doesn't believe they need to learn something.
Oh, we're there now.
And the reality
We're
is,
there right now.
the reality is all of those individuals have to come to a place to know that they need re-education. They need readjustments. They need it until they come to that realization, and I refer to it as their prodigal son experience.
Right.
And we have to stay out of the way and allow them to go through their prodigal son experience. Let them keep bumping their head till they're tired of bumping their head. And when they look and see you prospering in a way that they want to prosper, when they see you walking in a way they want to walk, then they'll inquire. Because now when they inquire, they're less able and apt to resist the information. Why? Because now you asked for it.
I got it.
And the thing is, if we start trying to give this information and they haven't asked for it, we're trespassing.
Ah!
And we don't even recognize that we're trespassing.
So let me get the order, because this is so important. Because I am a leader. I don't make excuses. It is what it is.
Absolutely.
I have lived a very, very interesting life, as you would say.
Absolutely.
And it has not been without blow-ups, mishaps, and everything else, poorly executed, all the above. However, when we look at this societal behavior, particularly today where people are queens, I'm a queen, I'm like, based on what?
Exactly.
What? Well, I'm a king. Based on what?
Exactly.
What? Well, you have to know it's in me. Well, you need to manifest it.
Exactly.
Because I'm not looking at a queen next to me. That's not what I'm looking at. I'm not seeing those indicators by my definition of what a person who leads does. First, you have to learn how to follow.
Absolutely.
Because if you're not a good follower, you'll never ever be a good leader. It's not possible.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is those character issues of integrity, meaning stop lying and stop thinking that we stupid and don't know you're lying. You know, that's even deeper. Stop doing things that do not reflect well on the Father.
But most people don't evaluate things to understand that the things that they're doing are reflecting on the Father. They don't look to see that they're reflecting on anybody, because
they just do
it because they're doing it with an intent. They're doing it with a specific purpose in mind, and it doesn't matter. But the intent is selfish in its nature. It's narcissistic in its being because it wants to control, dominate, and be domineering. And the reality is, it wants to be noticed, and it wants to be recognized, and it wants to be prestigious, and it wants to be, and it wants to be, and it wants to be. So everything is wrapped around the evolution of it wanting to be that thing that it's positioned itself to, in their minds, to be. And when they start lying, they're actually telling themselves the lie they're trying to tell you. And they're trying to live out this lie to make it a truth. It doesn't make it a truth.
It doesn't make it a truth.
But the reality
is, a well-dressed pig.
But the reality is, they have to come to the realization that they're a well-dressed pig. They have to come to the acknowledgement. We can't bring them to that.
Put the mirror up because they can't see.
The only place we're supposed to have the mirror is in front of us.
Exactly.
Because if they're not getting it, I'm not being an appropriate representation of what it's supposed to be. And if we bring ourselves to the place where we say, okay, if they're in my environment and they're still not getting it, I'm not presenting the appropriate representation of what it is because they're not getting it.
Oh man, you're killing me.
So now when I
killing me, Dennis.
So now when I start adjusting the things that I'm doing, and I adjust the things that I'm doing, and I adjust the things that I'm doing, and I said that 3 times for a reason.
Yes, you did. Okay.
I adjust the things that I'm doing. Why? Because it's going to put me in a better position to be in alignment with what God said.
Okay. First.
2, I'm going to realign the things that I say. Why? Because it's going to put me in a better position to be seen a different way by those that see me.
Okay.
Number 3, it's going to bring me the security of knowing that God approves of what I'm doing, because when I realign myself in that manner,
Yes.
God gives a blessing. And when the blessing comes, the blessing is, well done, my good and faithful servant. Because we always say
Wow.
that God provides where he guides.
Yes.
So if I'm doing what God said, he always sends provision
Always.
as an acknowledgement that I'm doing the appropriate thing.
Right.
And when I tell individuals that the Father has multiplied my finances 5 times in the last 6 years, they look at me like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I wish I could break it down and tell you.
Right.
I wish you had time enough to sit
Right.
and listen. And the realities are this. There's 613 ordinances that Jesus walked in perfect obedience to.
613?
613 ordinances. We see these individuals that wear these prayer shawls.
Yes.
And they have these tassels
Oh,
on
yes.
them,
Oh,
and all the
yes. Oh,
strings
yes.
and all the knots. And there's 613 of them. If you count all the knots, the tassels, and all the little things, the fringes, if you count every one of them, there's 613. Why? They represent the 613 ordinances of God. And the reality is, many of us, we get stuck on 10. The 10 Commandments. We can't get past the 10.
Right.
So this not even a reason to talk about the other 603.
You're right.
Because we get stuck on 10. But when you get to the place of recognizing that it's systematic, because the reality and why we struggle with the 10 is because we approach the 10 with a one-dimensional mindset.
Okay.
And we don't approach it from the reality that everything that we do is 3-dimensional. And then if we don't deal with all 3 elements, the element that we don't deal with drags us back to where we're trying to get away from.
Okay.
So let's just talk about our financial health for a minute.
Yeah. That's something I like.
There are principles that govern money.
Yes.
If we don't become obedient to the principles that govern money, we won't have money to govern.
Absolutely. That's a law.
But the exact same is true. If you're not applying the principles that govern money, you won't govern the principles that govern health and wellness.
Right. Because they all
are in succession.
Right.
They all work together.
Right.
And same thing is true when you talk about your mental maturity. You
Yes.
mentioned maturity,
Yes,
and we're not
yes.
maturing in that way. If you're not adhering to the principles of maturity, which the Bible speaks to in ways like putting down your youthful lust. When we start aligning ourselves with the principles of God, we align ourselves to be in a position to be the receivers of the gifts of God.
You know, that's interesting. I was speaking of that on my radio show not too long ago, that every child wants to get candy and cookies. That's the child nature. But it is only when you have come into adulthood, real maturity in adulthood, that you don't do childish things. You don't do silly things. I said this not to be demeaning, but I said for an older man in his 60s to try to play basketball and he's not physically fit is ridiculous. That's ridiculous. And I know you play basketball.
But let's talk about how good God is.
Okay.
So now, this has been when I was 55, so it was 7 years ago.
Okay.
7 years ago, I was 55.
Yes.
My 16-year-old nephew was starting varsity in an upper Ohio State basketball team.
Okay.
So he comes down here, he's got his little warm-up on and his little chest stuck
little
out.
buff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's
Hey,
like, he looks at me and he says, well, Dad said back in your day, you was pretty all right. I said, excuse me, back in my day. Back in my day. I said, well, let's analyze the ballistics.
All
I said,
right.
now, I'm 55 years old. I haven't played basketball in 13 years. You play every day, and you're 16 years old, and you're at the top of your health. I said, so there's absolutely no reason why I should win, because all the odds are stacked against me.
Right.
I said, come on, little boy, let's go play. So the first game we played to 21, he had 21,
Okay.
I had 5.
Okay.
And he stuck his chest out that much farther.
Just
And
bang.
I said, wait a minute, time out. I said, the first game was for you to show me what you have. now that I see what you have, come here, let me show you how this game is played. And the second game, I had 21 and he had 5.
What did he say?
Wisdom. I said, now, go home and tell all your boys that your 55-year-old uncle that ain't played basketball in 13 years beat you. And then see if they think you the man now. And the whole point of the matter is not so much of showing and proving to the 16-year-old that I can still play with you, but the point of the matter is, if God blesses me to be in health, to be able to play with the 16-year-olds and still beat the 16-year-olds at what they do best. What are the limitations?
Oh, none.
Exactly. So if there are no limitations by age.
But you said something interesting, and that was that you observed him on the first go-round. Because he's in the game, and you're willing to defer to watch.
Exactly.
And then to apply what you watched to destroy his game.
Exactly. But the thing is, we don't want to take the time
to watch,
to take the loss, because you have to take the loss.
You do.
You have to humble yourselves. You have to come to a place of humility.
Yes.
And you have to allow the process to play out, and you have to allow them to win. And then once they've won, now you say, oh, you just started the record. It ain't over yet. Let's play the second part of the record.
Let's play. And I think, you know, that's an interesting anecdote that you shared. We, again, getting a perspective that is 120 years and not 4 score.
Exactly.
The promise is 120 if you do such and such and such and such. So few are even living 4 score, which is why they get excited. Oh, I made it. I'm like, well, you made it where? Well, God promised, but when you give a perspective of that versus the 80, things shift. And as we grow older in time, earth time, I would say earth time, not eternal time, which is timeless, the ability to look back and to look forward becomes even more important. When we recognize that people have to become observers of who you are and what you're doing as a basis for them improving their lives and living wholesome, authentic lives. Because one of the things that I look around today, people don't even know who they are.
A major identity crisis going on. Major identity crisis going on.
Speak on that.
And that's the true essence of what I was referring to when I was talking about the tree planted by the river.
Yes.
We're all trees planted by the river based on our ordinal positioning, where we find ourselves in culture and in reality of where we stay, and there are influences that have been assigned for your development. And the world has a whirlwind of influences it brings to develop.
But are they assigned for our development?
They're assigned for our destruction.
Okay.
But they're designed for our development so that we become a proponent that adds to their system when we're in our youthfulness. Okay. And after they've extracted all of our youthfulness from us and they don't have anything else they can take from us, then they throw us away as old people.
And it is a throwaway, Dennis.
Exactly. But this is the reality of evolution over here in the kingdom. When you come over in the kingdom, we have to understand some worldly validations. Okay. There's been a validation in the world. Doctors have said the body possesses the capability of replenishing itself every 7 years.
Every 7 years. We have to cycle back again.
The body has the capabilities of replenishing itself every 7 years. So if the body has the capabilities of replenishing itself every 7 years, and you recognize that there's a deficiency, or you recognize that there's a problem,
fix it.
And fixing it is only going to take 7 years. But unfortunately, we're in this microwave age, and everybody has we want it right now. And the reality is, you can have the superficial fix right now, but you're not going to have the longevity to talk about it. Because the reality of things, the things of God are eternal,
Right.
not the things of man. So now if you want to do things God's way, you have to do it in God's time. And if you allow that 7-year process to ensue with the reevaluation process and understanding of what I did to get here.
Right.
So now when I recognize all the things that I did to get here and I make the adjustments and say I'm going to sow life into this season and I'm not going to sow the things that caused me to be in this position in the last season.
Right.
You find the next season 7 years from now, you're looking at yourself going, wow. And it's
Right.
like, and I have, you say, how did you know that? I said, well, I have manifested reality. I said, my father was diagnosed with diabetes. And he said to me that he wanted to get rid of the diabetes. I said, well, Daddy, if you do these things consistently every day, I said, the diabetes will go away. And he said, you know what, son, I'm going to try it. I said, okay. I said, well, you try it, Daddy. And 3 years from that date,
Yes.
he went to the doctor, and the doctors were like, what did you do? We can't find your diabetic symptoms. We can't find any evidence of diabetes in you. What did you do? And my son, I said, yeah, I know, Dad. I know.
That's a beautiful testimony.
And the
That's
realities of this, if we just simply take a moment to say, you know what? That instruction came from a child. The child told his father, Daddy, try this.
Right.
And Daddy was able to humble himself and say, you know what, son, I'm going to try that. And in the same point is true in every realm of life. Every issue we ever encounter, every challenge we ever have. If we just humble ourselves to understand that somebody with a lesser knowledge is going to help you with your knowledge of problem. Somebody with the lesser. And you know why? What the example is of the lesser?
What?
David. Because all the mighty men of valor, all the men that could fight, couldn't kill Goliath.
They could not.
But here came this little boy with a rock and a rag.
With a rock
and a rag. Right. And he killed Goliath with a rock and a rag. And all the warriors couldn't do it. And I'm like, okay, so now that being the point being the same. There's going to be information coming from sources that aren't qualified to give you the information.
But it's the information you need. And on that note, we've got to wrap up. Our time is up. Oh, I know. I have to have you back. It's so good to see you.
It is great to see you.
And I'm so appreciative of what you shared with me, some very real key takeaways today in terms of our evolution and growth. I'm going to change my vision to 120 years. And now I get excited all over again. And Elder Dennis Hatchett, it's just such a pleasure. Do you have a phone number you want to leave for people that like to get more or learn more?
Oh, sure.
Okay,
sure.
quick.
I'll give you my number right quick, 513-470-2501. That's 513-470-2501. Phone's on all time.
Well, amazing. I'm so glad that he took time out of his very busy schedule and his life to share for us to grow, because change is a challenge, but change you must. It's either you're going to change or change is going to be imposed upon you. Let's choose the Father's way and embrace change and see 120 years as our future and not 80. God bless you today. I'm Miichelle Graves, the Money Lady, and thank you for being a part of the Power of Money television with my very special guest, Elder Dennis Hatchett, talking about evolution. You take care, and God bless you. There's something in this studio that